Hi everyone, welcome back to Cloud on Air. My name is Jay Jenkins. I'm a customer engineer based here in Singapore, and I've got some special guests with me today. But before I get to that, already today we've done an overview of Google Cloud Platform. We actually had another customer, Smart Parking, talking about what they're doing in Auckland with IoT. We also had a demonstration of IoT from one of our solution architects, Marco Lepisto. But let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about microservices and creating scalable applications with Omise. So actually, I've got a couple guests here. If you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Fred. I'm the CIO at Omise. So I've been working on Omise since the very beginning, which is 4 years from now. And here's Philip.
Yeah, I'm Philip. I'm head of DevOps team, and I'm working for Omise now for about 1.5 years.
Great, thanks. And as before, you can ask a question down below, and we have experts standing by ready to assist. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to have you guys here.
It's a pleasure.
And thank you for flying in from Bangkok as well to be with us today.
Thanks for the invitation.
So Omise, could you give us some background on Omise?
Yeah, sure. So in 2014, we started as an e-commerce platform and with a very small team. But during that time, we had difficulties and problems with payment. So we had this open e-commerce platform, but we had no payment gateway to process. So we decided, why not let's build a payment gateway? So we pivoted from e-commerce, we dropped it, and decided to build a payment gateway, which is like great and easy to use. That's the story of Omise.
Fantastic.
Yep.
So how many customers have you grown from since 2014?
So 2014 was late 2014, around October. We had like 10 customers beta. So in 2015, we got the approval and license, everything ready to go. So we had about 100 customers live. 2016, from 100, we had 1,000, 10 times more. And last year, we closed with around 5,000 customers. So year to year, around 500% growth.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, so with that, obviously you've got like a lot of transactions you have to handle. And with that sort of growth, I mean, what were you guys feeling at the time?
Yeah, at the beginning, we didn't have many transactions, so we could just launch the bare minimum instances. But as we grow, we had customers who had events, and they could send like thousands of transactions in just a minute. So you had to really think harder, how can we scale? So we came to a conclusion that scaling is a really important part of the business. So now we can handle about thousands of transactions a second.
Wow, fantastic. So before we get on to architecture, what are some of the key drivers affecting the payments industry today? And how are you responding to that?
Right. So the key factors are uptime, 100% uptime, or 99.999. Speed in transactions, flexibility in the product. So our product must be flexible for the customer to use. They're not bound to a specific way to do it. And of course, very good error handling, right? How can we show the customer they did right or wrong in the message? Those are very crucial parts to make easy for anyone to use our payment gateway.
Right, and what would success look like for your business, and I guess along with that for your customers as well, right?
Right. Yeah, so our goal is to have a very good foundation to cover the requirements from the industry. So you're able to provide all of those technologies using the right tools, right? Like Google and Kubernetes and containers.
Right. So speaking of like Google, our platform, and using things like Kubernetes and containers, so you have some objectives, right, that you have to meet for your customers, and regulatory objectives as well.
Yeah, sure.
So what IT strategy are you pursuing to meet those objectives and for the needs of your business?
Right. So our strategy is very, very simple, right? We have to scale fast, we have to be secure, and we have to be compliant. Security is very important for our payment gateway. We have all the customers' credit card with us, so you have to make sure those credit cards are safe, right? So to achieve that, you have to use the right technology.
Okay, so you mentioned tools like Kubernetes, but of course, those things are open source, right? So Google open sourced that. What made you consider, moving to Google Cloud specifically?
Well, We started off with just instances, basic instances, VMs, and we provisioned them with Chef. We didn't have a really, it was very difficult to auto scale. Provisioning instances take a long time to launch. So we decided that since our applications are easy to Dockerize, why not go for the full-blown suite of services like Kubernetes? And it was actually a really easy decision because Kubernetes on Google is already very well integrated. So for us, it was a very clear decision to go for it.
Right, and I guess what were some of the considerations that you were making operationally, right? Because going Kubernetes is great, moving to microservices is fantastic, and there's been a lot of buzz and movement in that direction.
Right.
But there are a lot of things you have to change operationally in order to adapt to that.
Actually, not really that much. So, yeah, operationally, we have to drop our old infrastructure style of deploying and provisioning. And Kubernetes is a bit different. We have to learn the kubes control, the command line tools.
Right.
And all the applications have to be able to pass the test and build the image and deploy to the Kubernetes. So at the beginning, it was a bit of change. But operationally, it doesn't change much for developers. It's completely transparent for them. All they have to do is git push, merge PR, it's deployed.
Well, that's great. So I guess in terms of, because you said you sort of were starting off with normal VM instances and you sort of moved to a container-based workload, were your services already sort of, I guess, logically separated? Did you already have, stateless instances that made it easier for you to move?
Yeah, well, we still have our main application, the payment gateway,
Right.
which is quite a big application, but we also have many other microservices. So all the microservices from the beginning, they were already kind of designed to be able to deploy separately. So moving to container was not difficult.
All right, cool. So did you evaluate any other environments, right? Obviously you have some choices out there.
Yeah, sure. We have, we deploy actually mostly in the cloud, in the different cloud providers. And also we have to deploy to servers in a standard old-style rack infrastructure. So, yeah, with high complexity and difficulty to scale, it's also time-consuming. It was slowing us down because there's a high maintenance cost for Chef and maintaining the rack servers. So that's why we choose the Kubernetes.
Okay, and so along with Kubernetes, what aspects of your architecture or business made it good to move to Google Cloud?
Yeah, so I'll let Philip take care of that next question.
So actually the main decision was for Kubernetes that it basically can run anywhere. It's not directly bind to Google Cloud. So it's like from PCI requirements, we also have to run on-premise infrastructure in other countries where we operate. So from that one is what's like an easy decision to move to Kubernetes. Yeah, and it's like we don't want to bind us strictly to services that cloud providers offer. So it's like I'm not saying they are bad, but it's like from our requirements, we just basically use Kubernetes because we just can deploy it anywhere we want.
Right. Yeah. Certainly, portability is one of the primary benefits of using things like containers. Portability within sort of, I guess, your development CI/CD pipeline.
Yeah.
Number one, right? So you know if it's working locally, that it's going to work whenever you put it into the cloud or an on-premise solution. And the ability to, as you said, to move that for countries which might have specific requirements that you keep it in country, you can still deploy those same containers that you're using in the cloud into on-premise implementations.
Yeah, right. So it's like from Google Cloud, I can go directly to on-premise within a few minutes if I want to do that. So that's perfect for us.
Okay, fantastic. So besides Kubernetes, I guess Kubernetes, Google Cloud, which products specifically are you using as part of Google Cloud Platform?
So actually we just only use Compute Engine and Kubernetes nodes. Beside that, it's just the basics, VPC network, DNS, container registry, but that's basically it.
Okay, so how do those different products work together to help you deliver your payment gateway?
So it's like at Omise, we are building very customized infrastructures. So that's why we don't want to go to Cloud SQL or any other services that providers are offering. So, but again, it's like I'm not saying Cloud SQL is bad. It's if it's fit for your company, use it. It's a great thing. But yeah, it's like it was easy decision since we already had microservices.
Right.
That we want to go for the best architecture that's on the market available for us. And yeah, for us it was, I think, the best solution.
Yeah. The microservices, they are really lightweight and fast. So since you deploy all of them in the same VPC, in the same zones, and they can communicate internally extremely fast without latency, delays, or anything like that.
Right.
And we take advantage of the metrics as well. So we can metrics how long it takes for one microservice to connect to another internally. And also the security, because everything is internal. It doesn't go to the internet, right? It doesn't go out. So as long as it's inside and in the containers and inside the Kubernetes clusters, it's really a lot more secure.
Right. And in fact, one of the things I was talking about earlier when I did the overview is the fact that whenever you set up a VPC in Google, one of the things that makes it different is actually it's a global VPC.
Right.
Right. So even if you're running in a single region today, if you have aspirations to roll out globally, having that single VPC, knowing that it's on sort of a dark fiber as it's going between those data centers is extremely important from a security perspective.
Yeah, and also data recovery, right? So with our scripts, with our infrastructure style, how we done it, we can, let's say, we can deploy it to another country like US or Japan in less than 10 minutes. We can have everything up and running because you have database backups and synchronization to other regions far away. So let's say you have a read replica of the database in Japan, right? So if something happened in Singapore, or we're not happy, or we want to change the country, we can deploy everything in Japan. Within 10 minutes, the whole cluster, everything come up, and we can promote the new database as a master. And that's it,
Right.
DNS change, done.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So I guess that's one of the other benefits of using. I guess there are several benefits that you guys have seen from using GKE. So again, for those of you watching, GKE is Google Kubernetes Engine, which is the managed service for Kubernetes. So if anybody has ever set up their own Kubernetes cluster, it's a fantastic tool, but there's a lot of work that has to be done. So
Yeah, so it's like the learning curve is really high. It's like if you go from Kubernetes or from nothing to Kubernetes and you want to set up your own cluster, it's like I would recommend you to have at least your own DevOps team to do that. Or it's like just use a managed service and focus on your automation of your microservices, which is also very important.
Yeah, the initial learning curve is pretty high, but I think in overall is a very high return investment you do. So you spend some time to learn it, to really understand how it works, how the metrics work, how the auto-scaling, how the controllers work, namespace, everything. Once you really know it, then later you can spend really easily and you can automate much easier and faster. Like the maintenance later is much less because Google does the automatic updates, You can do the rolling upgrade of the instances and the hosts. We don't have to worry about downtime. Is my server going to go down if I upgrade? Those kind of things are really high return.
right.
We found it really good for us. So you can deploy new versions without losing a single transaction.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I guess that's one of the benefits sort of we didn't talk about, right? I mean, obviously you guys are moving at a really rapid pace, and as you said, you have to have this uptime.
Yep.
And Kubernetes Engine obviously provides that Kubernetes infrastructure that allows you to sort of scale that and make a highly available application. But then, what do you do for things like updates? So can you tell me a little bit about that? So how does your update process work today?
So actually, on Kubernetes itself, it's like we have everything automated. It's like as soon as a developer is pushing new code to Git, it triggers a new pipeline which is building the container, running the tests, and will also deploy the new built container to Kubernetes. And on about Kubernetes itself, it's like Google is taking care about that. So it's usually just press a button and just wait until it's finished.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. There's one of our developer advocates. I don't know if you guys have seen like his YouTube things. Kelsey Hightower. Have you watched any of his stuff?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, right. So I mean, he sort of calls that sort of Kubernetes the hard way, right? You can sort of set up your own cluster, set up your own infrastructure, manage Kubernetes entirely on premise if you want. And that's great to sort of have that, right? It's, as you said, you can always pull your applications back to do on-prem or put them in another data center.
Yeah.
What Google Kubernetes engine allows you to do is it sort of manages all that for you, right? So you don't have to even know what etcd is. It sort of just takes care of that for you, scales that for you, and then you get the added benefit as well of having the container optimized operating system, and as you said, automatic updates to the underlying operating system.
Right.
You get the benefits of Google's live migration of the infrastructure. So if we have to do a hypervisor update, again, you sort of aren't affected by that. And there's also the capability then to scale your nodes, right? So essentially, you can have all those containers, but if you get like some sort of peak in payments for some reason, you guys also have the comfort that you'll be able to scale that infrastructure as well.
Yeah, scaling is also quite easy because of the metrics of Kubernetes. So for us, scaling is a bit different than the standard way. In the standard way of scaling, usually you do CPU or memory. Like if your CPU goes high, you have too many requests, you can scale out. But for us, it's a bit different because payments takes a long time to process. So when a payment comes, it can take 5 to 10 seconds to be processed. And those 5 seconds, the servers are not doing anything. There's barely any memory, there's no CPU, it's just a network I/O waiting, right? So how do you scale? How do you know how many requests are coming? So you can use the network metrics for HTTP, like how many requests are coming. And based on the requests, we can calculate how many we can handle. So if you can handle 100 per pod, for example, but if you have more than 100 coming, or 90 or 80, it's time to scale up, all right? So automatically we can scale. That's one of the good things we can do easily. And the second most important is connection draining when you deploy.
Right.
So when a transaction comes to the server, we have to wait, let's say 5 seconds or even 10 seconds sometimes. The credit card have to go to the credit card network, and we have to wait for Visa, MasterCard to reply with a response, right?
Yeah, so maybe you should mention it's a synchronous call, not asynchronous.
Yeah, it's a synchronous, right? So when the requests come, we have to let the client wait. Okay, wait, we're going to process your credit card. And what if you want to deploy a new version right at the moment?
Right.
So we can have 100 transactions already being processed. So how it works is that we don't deploy, we don't shut down right away. We leave it running, but we block all new connections. Like all new connections cannot come to that pod, and the new one gets deployed and adds to the load balancer.
Right.
So it drains all the connection and wait for all transactions to finish. When there's no transaction, then it kills the old pod.
Right.
So for that, you have to have more hardware available because your memory can double, right? So you can deploy a second version in parallel with the old version. Yeah. Before we used Kubernetes, we were doing that with hub proxy,
Right.
and you had to do all custom things. You have to query the hub proxy API and put the servers in maintenance mode, wait a minute, 30 seconds, and then it was really complicated and hard to maintain. But with the Kubernetes built in, so we don't have to do any. We don't have to take care of it.
Right. So is there anything that you sort of like wish you would have known then that you know now?
A lot of things, right? For example.
Yeah, for example, it's like, as you already mentioned, it's like the update mechanism is really easy.
Yeah, really smooth.
Yeah. So it's like, even if you don't have any knowledge about Kubernetes at all, it's like the best start what you can do, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the keys. Actually, anytime you're using Google.com, for example, you're actually connecting to a container, right? So actually, internally, I think in 2006 we started using containers internally.
Wow.
And we did a lot of work on the Linux kernel as well to make sure that it could support containers. So adding things like C groups into the Linux base. And we actually had this internal product called Borg that would actually containers for us. And as containers became more popular, and you had these great open source projects coming from Docker, and as you know, with Kubernetes, we're using that Docker format. Internally, we actually had a different format that we're using because there wasn't a Docker at the time we started our implementation. And whenever we thought about, as containers became more and more popular, and we took a look at the orchestration services that were available, we decided to, the decision was to try to open source Borg. But because it had, had sort of had this organic growth since 2006, essentially the team decided, we're just going to rewrite it. We're going to take all the learnings that we've had and implement that in Kubernetes. And then we open sourced that, and it's had fantastic support from the community. I think we're only doing we're making maybe 40% of the commits, 60% is now coming from the broader community. So it's fantastic to see the open source community embracing that. But those technologies are what allow Google to be Google, right? The fact that you go to google.com and it never says down for maintenance.
Exactly.
Right? The fact that you go to google.com to check to see if you are if you're connected to the internet, essentially, right? So sometimes I'll go to google.com not to search for anything, but just am I connected? Oh, google.com is working. I'm connected.
Okay.
Right, so it's what sort of allows that sort of capability. So I think we have some audience questions. So let me just now I'll switch over to where is the question slide? Actually, while I bring up the question slide, one thing I wanted to ask you guys is, as you start to use Kubernetes in earnest, and as you sort of look at expanding your footprint globally, how does that affect your architectural decisions moving forward?
Architectural decision about this. Well, actually, we don't have to worry about that because, as I said before, it's like if you have an automated infrastructure, it's easy to roll up or roll out your scripted infrastructure anywhere you want. And it can be Google Cloud, it can be some other cloud provider, or it even can be on-premise. It's you probably don't have to customize anything. It's just if you go on-premise, you maybe have to know how to set up Kubernetes, but everything else, it will not change. You just can keep using your current coded infrastructure.
Okay. And what are you doing in terms of, I guess, what does your CI/CD deployment pipeline look like right now? What kind of tools are you using? Like you mentioned Chef that you were using before. But what does it look like today?
So right now it's we're using Jenkins, and Jenkins will take care of everything. So it will run the tests of the application or of the microservice. It will build the container, sign the container, upload it to a Google or upload it to a Docker registry, where we're using Google Cloud Docker registry at the moment, and then just deploy the built container to Kubernetes if everything else passes before.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's great, right? That you can have that sort of automation. And again, I think not only is the container side important, the actual production side, it's that sort of that DevOps pipeline that's required in order to take advantage of that.
But it's even if it's if you have a failed container going into production, it would be easy with Kubernetes to actually roll back to the previous version. You don't have to wait 15 minutes, like what we had to do with Chef before.
Right.
It's just a matter of a few seconds. But it's for this, it's really important that you have a good automation for that.
Right.
So it's at any time you should be able to build any build that you want to have. It's you should be able to
Sure.
Yeah, and
to get it back.
also you don't have to deploy the whole infrastructure at once. If your application allows to be compatible between versions, like version 100 and version 101, so you can deploy version 101 in, let's say, 20% of the pods, like one
Right.
node out of 3. And if your error rates go up, you can, hey, something wrong. Let's see what's happening, right? You can also deploy in phases, like slowly, within like 30 minutes per pod, and watch your error rates as well. Error rates you can monitor using Sentry or any tools you like.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important concept as
Yeah.
well, right? The idea that you can actually use that for A/B testing or for canary testing, right? As you
Yeah,
said,
right.
is this change going to have a performance impact?
Yeah.
Is this change, going to break someone's use of an API?
Yep, exactly. So, yeah.
Okay, great. So one of the questions we have is around a custom node OS. So what node OS are you using today for your Kubernetes implementation?
It's just like the default one, the COS.
Yeah.
But beside that, it's like you also can choose to Ubuntu 16.04, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the moment, yeah.
Yeah. So with GKE, there is a container optimized OS that we prefer to use for that. But you can also manage your own cluster on GCP if you would like, which allows you to choose your own operating system. So if you wanted to use CoreOS, there's certainly nothing stopping you from doing that. They're a great partner and they've got a great operating system. So if you wanted to do that, you could. Another question is, what countries are already using Omise as a payment gateway?
So right now, Thailand as a main hub, headquarters. Japan was the second place we launched, and the third place was Singapore. So we are live in those 3 countries.
Right, fantastic. That's good. And how did that align with sort of, I guess, your growth?
How does it align? Well, of course, we're growing a lot in Southeast Asia.
Yes.
Because of the lack of good quality payment gateways. But for example, in Thailand, we're growing really fast, faster than the other countries.
Right. So earlier you were talking about using tools like Kubernetes for a hybrid environment. Do you guys have any sort of hybrid environment or any sort of disaster recovery plan for a hybrid environment today? So one of the questions is, what would that look like? But
Yeah, sure, we do. I mean, we have to comply with the local country's laws and requirements, right? For example, in Japan, and also we're looking into Indonesia. So, for example, Japan is a good example of a hybrid. We have everything on the cloud, but we still need a direct connection to the car network with a direct line. So we have to set up a in-between rack in Japan to have a direct connection to the car network. And when a transaction comes to our cloud, we just route it to that system, which behaves as a proxy to forward to the car network. So it just acts as a third-party service.
Right.
Just that.
And is that that third-party service, which is just your service in an on-prem implementation, is that also running Kubernetes today?
Not yet,
Okay.
but we plan to. We have a lot of projects in the pipeline. We have a lot of migration to work on. So once we finish our main project, we're gonna try that one. Yeah, it will be a challenge, but let's see how it goes.
Okay, fantastic. So So how many pods are currently running on GKE? It might be kind of a hard question to answer.
Actually, we cannot really say that how many pods are running. It's like we have about 50 microservices running.
Yeah.
All of them are at least scaled up to 2 or 3, so that are already 150 running all the time. And then, of course, we told you it's like we're doing auto scaling, so
Right.
maybe one application has 20 pods right now, the other 150, I have no idea.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think that's one of the beauties of it, right? You don't necessarily kind of need to know, right? It really depends on how many people are using your services. You don't need to deny them this access to the service because it does do that auto scaling.
Yeah.
And what monitoring tool are you guys using today?
So we're using Prometheus, Grafana.
Yes.
Then we're using Greylog for centralized log management together with Elasticsearch. And that's probably it.
Yeah, I think but our biggest monitoring is Grafana. We have several graphical dashboards that monitors all the pods and all the services, the requests, the backend latencies, how long it's taking to charge a credit card to the card network, how long it's taking to charge a credit card to Japan backend, right? So all of that we monitor with Grafana, and we collect the metrics using Prometheus.
Okay,
So it's like the one advantage of using Prometheus is that you also can use this kind of metrics for your auto-scaling.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think the next question, it looks like you have a possible customer here. So do you
Yes.
support Malaysian merchants?
Well, we haven't launched in Malaysia yet, right? So, but if you're interested, you can use Omise Japan or Omise Thailand. Omise Japan, all the payments will be settled in Japan yen. In Thailand, it will be in Thai baht, and Singapore is Singapore dollars. So if you have a presence in one of those countries, bank account, you can try those countries. But you need a bank account there. You need kind of registration there.
Right.
Yeah.
So supported directly in Malaysia. So the answer short term is no.
No, right.
Right. So the next question: if the internet or Google servers are down, is there a contingency plan for this?
Yep.
Yeah. So our whole infrastructure is scripted, and as I said before, since we're using Kubernetes only and not using cloud-specific services like Cloud SQL, it's like we are able to launch our Kubernetes cluster on any cloud provider that we want,
Right.
or that is not offline
Yeah.
at this moment.
Right.
Yeah. Although if the internet is down, I think
Yeah.
we've got bigger problems.
Yeah, that's definitely bigger. But I think one of the best approaches to this is to have if your application depends on the database, the biggest problem is the database, right? What is your data? You have to be synced with your data. If you're down here, you cannot launch a new service with empty data. So for that, we use replica. We can have a replica in a different country, for example. It doesn't have to be really big instances. It can be a smaller one that it could just barely handle the traffic while we do the disaster recovery.
Right.
So we can have a real replica, let's say in Japan or US, and like Philip said, we have everything scripted, so we can run the script and deploy everything in that country using the Kubernetes, and promote the replica to be the new master,
Right.
and route all the traffic to the new sites.
Yeah, and again, I think that's one of the beauties of Kubernetes in general, or containers in general, I should say, which is you can be pretty confident that if it runs on one cloud, if it runs on one type
right.
of
It's
VM,
like if you can launch a pod or a container at once, it's like you will not fail on the second or on the third one. It's like you always be sure that it's working.
right?
Yep.
Great. So you mentioned, one of the important things for you was security. I mean, I guess from a compliance perspective, it's nice that Google Cloud supports things like PCI for credit card compliance. But in terms of security, what are your other considerations when using something like GKE?
Well, for example, you can give specific access to specific teams. It's like if you split your applications, microservices, or containers into namespaces, it's like you can give very specific access to this namespace who can see, read, or write to that namespace.
Right.
So this is already really big advantage of that.
Great. And are you guys starting to investigate things like Istio as well for service mesh on top of Kubernetes?
Sorry.
Yeah, Istio. So it's part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So again, I think if you're interested in the service mesh and how you manage that and how you secure a service mesh, so it's a product that's been open sourced and it's part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation that will sit on top of Kubernetes. And right now we don't offer it on GKE as a service, but it's certainly something that we're looking at as we work with the Cloud Native Computing Foundation.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's another two more.
Oh, there are two more questions.
Yes.
So can GKE be used with other cloud providers? So I think that's more a question for me. So because of the way Kubernetes engine works and the fact that we offer the master node and we actually manage and scale those services for you, GKE itself can't be used with other cloud providers. However, Kubernetes can definitely be used with other cloud providers. It's open source. There's also both Amazon, for instance, and Microsoft announced that they're now part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Microsoft is already supporting Kubernetes in earnest, and Amazon is beginning to as well. I think also outside of Kubernetes itself, right, the whole container-based frameworks is supported even more broadly than Kubernetes alone. That said, Kubernetes is definitely the most popular open source container orchestration service. If you're using Kubernetes, as I said, you can use Kubernetes on other cloud providers or on-prem, just as Omise is doing, in order to make sure they have business continuity for their services. Right. The last question, what makes Omise different?
From other payment gateways like Stripe, well, the main reason we are different, localization.
Right.
We are based in Thailand. We have Thai documentation, Thai-based customer service. We link with local payment, alternative payments like internet banking and e-wallets. And so these are the main reasons we are different, right? So for example, if you launch in Japan, you can have, not just credit card, but also local other payments like counter payment, bill payment on that country. And in Thailand, we have internet banking from different banks. We're working on installments, and we're working on so many features that are local to the country. We are able to provide the support for that country in local language. So if you're Thai, you have Thai-speaking support, Thai documentation translated in local languages.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, things like localization, I think especially in Southeast Asia, we've seen across a number of services, is extremely important.
It's really important, yes. Support. We have to have a very good support that support the local people, local bank accounts, local currencies. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. And so what kind of benefits are you seeing from GKE? Like what kind of uptimes are you seeing today?
Uptimes are 100% at the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's really good to see. And again, it really is about having sort of like that horizontally scalable implementation.
Yeah.
I think if you take a look at most people when they think about reliability, and they still think about rock solid hardware, right? They really don't think that about the software, and it's really the software.
It is really the software, yes.
Yeah, right. It's the software that gives us that scalability. So here's just, I think, a general congratulations. Congratulations to the Omise team for what you guys have done in the region. And they find it extremely motivational for startups and new GCP users. So yeah, thank you for that.
Okay, welcome. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Fred, Philip. Thank you again for those fantastic questions. And later, we'll be hearing from Gojek talking about the data warehousing side of things. So here we've talked about sort of scalability for your applications and for your APIs and for your customers. And we'll talk about data warehousing and analytics later on today. So again, if you found this useful, please forward the link to your friends, to your colleagues. That link will be good to rewatch this broadcast. There is a feedback form that should have popped out on Philip's side over there. So please fill out that form as well. Let us know if this was useful so we can have more of these types of sessions in the future. So I will see you again in about an hour and a half. All right. Thank you again. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.